Hi guys, my name is Nithi and welcome back to my channel. So I haven't recorded anything in like a month, and it's almost close to midnight. It's a very random video. I just wanted to talk about books because I missed it. I missed talking about it, I missed filming it. So I'm just gonna do a March and April wrap-up, and hopefully this is a usable video and I can put this up. I literally have nothing planned. We're just gonna go through Goodreads and we're just gonna see what I read because I honestly don't even remember. The last video where I think I wrapped up February, and which is where I read Jade Legacy and I finished it. And then I listened to The River of Silver. That is the short story collection from S.A. Chakraborty from like the Deobad trilogy, and I didn't read the entire thing. I only read I think I read the first story, and I read like the story which I read the short story of Dara and Nari, and then I think there was a story there was like a scene at the end which is like a few years after the events of the Deobad trilogy. So I read that and I liked it. I just liked being in the world. It took me back to that world and how much I loved it, all the banter between Nari and Dara, and it was really good. It was way too short. I just wish there was more, but yeah. So the next one I listened to is an audiobook which is Hench, and this is it takes a very satirical look on superheroes and the whole saving the world thing, right, where they focus more on the collateral damage, or like the people who get hurt with these superheroes trying to save the world, with all the chaos and explosions and the destruction that they make, all in the name of like saving people, right? So now the story is about this main character who gets hired by a villain to do like the desk job, and I think I'm blanking because I don't remember. I enjoyed the first half of it, right, which is that's the thing. After the second half I just can't remember anything that happened in the entire book. It was just like completely took me out of the story. I just didn't give a shit about these characters anymore. As far as I can remember, the main character is somebody who works for villains, and she never goes on site, but she kind of wants to, and she does get the opportunity. But the one time she does, she gets into this horrible accident caused by the superhero in the story, and she loses her legs. She can't walk, she's paralyzed, and she stays at her best friend's place, and then she begins to research on how many people has this happened to, and realizes that there's a lot of people who have been victims of this particular superhero. And then she joins up with this big villain, again can't remember his name, and this is where things got really boring and I just couldn't care less about it, is when the villain gets kidnapped by the superhero, and then her entire motivation just turns to this villain like finding him and saving him, because they kind of strike up this very weird romance, or they kind of have like some chemistry, which is what they say, but I don't really see it. I just didn't care about it. I didn't care about the villain. I didn't care about this main character, like what she was doing at the beginning and how the story ended. Kind of just, it felt really flat, and it was trying to be a different sort of a superhero story where you actually focus on the villains, but it really didn't feel like it, because in this story the villains were good, you know, they were actually doing something good for like the people. So it didn't really make sense for why this story just decided to call these people villains. I honestly don't know, because the superhero is actually the villain. It's a very anticlimactic ending, and especially like I said, the half of the book was like, the second half of the book was all about saving this villain, and this is like every other story that I have read or every other superhero movie that I watched. So there was nothing different about it and not what I wanted, so I didn't like it. So I gave it 3 stars for like the beginning part of the first half, because I really enjoyed it. I wish it had taken that same path, but nah. And then just randomly I picked up Project Hail Mary again because I wanted to reread it, and I gave it 5 stars. It's again amazing. I'll probably read it again. It's a book that I just can't get over. I really like it. So, and then I read Stolen Tongues, which is a horror book, and this is definitely one of my favorites. It's right up there with The Patient by Jasper DeWitt. I gave this 5 stars. It is about this couple who goes up to like a cabin, and there is this entity who the wife is sleep talks, right? And this entity is somebody who talks back to her while she's asleep, and I don't want to spoil anything because the story is very Lovecraftian horror, and I really like that sort of stuff where it's just the entity is incomprehensible. You don't know why they're there. Like, they exist in this world, but not everybody can see them, and they're just like unknown beings, and they feed on your fear essentially. I really liked it. It's definitely like the only book that made me really scared, that I couldn't read this at night. I have a blog where I talk about all my thoughts, and you'll see in that, because I didn't read this at night. I just couldn't read it at night. Every time the book mentioned that the night is happening, and if I happen to be reading it at night, I just couldn't go through with it. I never read it. I only read it during the day, but it's a great book. I really liked it. I liked the ending. It's exactly the kind of ending that I liked and I wanted, because I didn't want it to feel over the top. So really enjoyed it. If you want to give it a try, I highly recommend you read the prologue and then decide for yourself. The prologue in itself is very unsettling and creepy, that I just had to read and figure out what happens after, because it's very gripping. So after that, I read Hook, Line and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. I listened to the audiobook for this, and I fucking can't remember the story. I don't care about it. I gave it 2 stars. I remember it was very boring and very uncomfortable, because the main guy in the story is just he's very just not my kind of romance, I would say. Especially because he objectifies women like all the time, and it's supposed to be sexy, and uses his like promiscuity to get sympathy from the readers, right? Oh, you know, I used to do this, but now I'm a different man. I'm a better person, but everybody thinks I'm still a player, or just some shit like that. I remember being really annoyed at that point, and it just continued to do that. So I didn't really like it. I don't remember the story. Something about this fisherman, and it's about some this guy who, I don't know, it's like a seafarer or something. I honestly don't remember. They just strike up a romance, whatever. I don't care about it. Just don't read it. It's not fun. So then I read the ebook for 7 Days in June, which another romance, and this time it did really well. I gave it 4 stars. I loved it. It's exactly the kind of romance I like, where it's not just about the romance aspect of it, where the characters actually have depth and there's a story going on, and romance is just a part of it, which is what I like. Even in romance, like, you don't necessarily have to focus solely on the romance when you're writing a romance book. You know, you can actually write a good story, which a lot of these books that I read tend to overlook. And this book showed me that there are books like this that can have both. So this basically is about 2 writers who met each other 7 days, who had like a relationship for 7 days long time ago in June, and they fell in love, and the guy, I think it's the guy who decides to leave. So that relationship was 7 days is a very short time to get to know somebody, but the stuff that was leading up to that 7 days they had was very emotional for both of them, and they were there for each other during that 7 days. In present day, they meet, I think, after like 15 or 16 years, like after a very long time, and they have this 7 days again in June, when they rekindle that spark and that relationship, and they realize that even though they haven't seen each other in so long, they have actually been writing about each other in their books. I think the female writer is writing about some vampire story, I think, and the guy is writing about something, and this girl is the inspiration. It's a very sweet story. I loved it. It's funny. It actually made me tear up a couple times. and I like how simple it is. I like the conversations they have. They're very insightful and very smart. So it was a good time. I really enjoyed it. So then I listened to the audiobook for Daisy Jones and the Six. This is a reread. I've never listened to the audiobook before, so I listened to it. I'm actually still listening to it. I haven't finished it. It's just something that I listen to randomly when I don't want to read a new book. I listened to the audiobook for Granny's Got a Gun by Harper Lynn, and I wanted it to be like Finley Donovan is Killing It because it sounded really cool. This is about this retired agent who's like a granny now. She has a family, she has grandchildren, and something happens in the neighborhood, and then she like becomes this CIA agent again because she was an agent, but she's never had to like use her skills before up until now since she's been retired. So she's not as strong as she used to be because she's really old. And so the premise is about her finding who the killer is because somebody murdered someone in the neighborhood and she thinks that somebody in her book club is responsible. So it's about her finding it out, and it's just, the premise sounds really interesting and fun, but it just didn't deliver. Honestly, the writing and the pacing of the story was just very boring, and it didn't leave enough time to develop any characters or develop a stronger plotline. It was just going from one place to another and figuring out who the killer is, which was fine, I guess, if you want to listen to it, because it's a very easy audiobook. If you want to listen to like when you're cooking, that's the kind of vibe I was getting, but it is not something that I would continue listening to because it's a series. Right, so then I listened to the audiobook for Dead Silence, which is definitely one of my favorite books of this year. I gave it 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. It's exactly the kind of, it's a horror, I would say, that I was looking for. I was gripping. I read it in like a day because I just couldn't put it down. I was listening to it, I was reading it. It was amazing. It's about this, yeah. It's not just horror, it's sci-fi horror. It's pitched as Titanic and The Shining in space, which is, The Shining, I don't know if that's accurate, but the Titanic part is true. So it's about this maintenance crew who is on their last mission to check like and maintain the belt, and that belt is like the farthest you can go in space travel, which is considered safe, and if you go out of it, the people at the belt are your last hope for help, right? They will basically come and help you if you go further and get into trouble. And this maintenance crew is on their last mission because the government or like whatever has decided that it's easier to just let robots do their job because there's no margin for human error and it's just cheaper. So the main character is like the captain of this crew, and she is not somebody who wants to go back, and there's a reason for it. It's not just that, not a very simple reason, I don't want to spoil it, but she doesn't want to be around humans for a specific valid reason. So while they're on that mission, they get a distress signal, a signal which is using very old technology, and they go and follow it, and they come across a cruiser, and they quickly realize that it is one of the famous ships to go like lost in space. It's the first and only luxury cruiser to go to space, and it's very similar to Titanic, where the idea was that luxury space travel for civilians is possible, and that's what they were trying to do. It was a year-long trip around the solar system, and 6 months into their voyage they disappear. No one knows what happens to it, and nobody found out the bodies or the ship, and now it's just lying here. This crew finds it, so they decide to board the ship. Yeah, so not for any noble reason, they just wanted to loot the place and get some money off of it. It's horrifying, especially when they board the ship and the shit that goes on. It's a horror, it's a sci-fi horror, so there's a lot of stuff that goes inside. I enjoyed every second of it, and there's also a time jump. Like there's 2 perspectives you're following the same character, but she's narrating the story of what happened inside the ship to like these 2 investigative officers, and also you go back to the past when they actually boarded the ship. So There are two timelines that you're following. They all come together at the end, of course, and it's a wild ride, man. I highly recommend it. It's a really good horror. It's fast-paced, it's action-packed, it's creepy, and honestly very thrilling. It's intense. I like the characters, I like the plot, and I definitely like the ending. I would say the ending isn't that shocking. It should be fairly predictable because the author is not really trying to hide it. They're giving you the answers as you read it, so it's not that hard to figure out. But yeah, I did like it. There's a very good there's a flow to the story, and there's a point to the entire story and what they're trying to say. So I loved it. I really liked it. I highly recommend it. It's definitely the book you need to pick up if you're watching this video, because I haven't read anything like it so far this year. So after that, I watched the movie Rocket Man. I know it's way overdue for me. It came out in 2019 or something, and I absolutely loved it. I haven't loved a movie as much as I liked it. I'm obsessed with it. I think by the time I'm recording this, I must have watched that movie like 4 or 5 times now. And I love the soundtrack. I love Taron Egerton and his performance, his songs. Like, I know he sings every song in that movie. I just can't stop listening to the soundtrack. It's incredible. I was on a massive Elton John kick. So I found out that he has an autobiography that he released along with the movie, and Taron Egerton is the one narrating it. I was very hesitant to read it at first because I thought because I watched the movie, I wouldn't be interested in reading it, like reading his story again, because I already watched it. But I was wrong. I actually really liked it. The autobiography is called Me by Elton John. I don't think he wrote it, but it's an amazing story, and it's a fascinating story. And you can't be Elton John, without having an extraordinary life the way that he lived it. It is extraordinary in its every sense of the word, and his life is nothing short of iconic and legendary. He's just this amazing human being that we can only ever aspire to be. And Taron Egerton's narration was also really good, which is what kept me going with this book, because I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much reading the physical copy, but he did like voices and different tones when he was narrating the book, so that I really enjoyed, and I read it in like 1 or 2 days. Yep, I read it in a day. Yeah, so my review, or like my final thoughts, were a life lived that was nothing short of extraordinary, which is, yeah, that would sum up Elton John's life. Suffice it to say, I gave it 5 stars. I normally don't rate non-fiction, but this I have to. It's especially because it's not just his story, it's the way it was narrated, it's the way it was written, and everything about it was just really good. So after that, I've been reading for like a really long time, since the start of this year, and I haven't had a break. And I think this was my slump. It's not even a slump, I just didn't want to read anything new. And on a very random whim, I picked up Harry Potter, and I went back into that world. I read the entire series in like 2 weeks or a week and a half. I just wanted to revisit the wizarding world and just get into something comfortable, and I wanted to read it, just didn't want to read anything new, so I just picked it up. And I've never listened to the audiobook narrated by Stephen Fry, which is weird, I know, because I know it's a very popular audiobook. I know a lot of people prefer to listen to the audiobook, so I wanted to give it a try, and yeah, definitely I'm glad I went that way this time, because it was a different experience, and his narration was really good, and I flew through the books because it's just very quick and easy story. I've only ever read the entire series once before, and it was like 2017, I think, and I haven't picked it up since. So this was a great time for me to revisit the books, and it achieved the purpose of what I wanted it to do, because I'm back in the reading mood again, and I want to read, I want to film, I want to vlog. So that's really good. There's nothing to say about Harry Potter. I mean, you all know the story, you know what it's about. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, that's fine. I loved it. I gave all 7 books 5 stars, which is what my original rating was. And I didn't really vlog anything because there's just nothing to say. I didn't really have any thoughts or feelings about those books. I just read them because I wanted to just read the books and listen to the audiobook. And that is it for this video, because I just finished The Deathly Hallows this morning, and I'm currently reading this book, which is, I don't have the cover, it's The Shadow of the Gods. I read this earlier, like in my last vlog I was reading it, but honestly, like after reading Harry Potter I completely forgot the story, so I'm reading it from the beginning, and I'm planning to vlog, so hopefully that happens. I really want it to happen. That is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. I make videos every Saturday and the occasional video on Wednesday, so if you want to see more of this content, please subscribe, and I will see you soon with a new video.